Guys, so welcome back. So today we're gonna look at graphical editor called Photoshop. And I promised you that we're not only gonna look at technical things, but we're gonna have to understand how the creative people use it. Since it's system administration for media companies, for creative companies, let's look at that. And let me hide my picture so that it's not obstructing the interface of Photoshop. Okay, now it looks good. So let's take a look. So on the left, you have a traditional kind of like tools, right? You could, most of it is selections, and one of the big questions is that how do you select what you want? So for example, if you're working on a commercial for the car, you need to edit the image. How do you select the car but leave the background behind? Or the opposite, how do you select the sky so you can make the skies more dramatic, right? So these are different selection tools, different tools which create different shapes on the screen, right? And on the top you have traditional menu, file, edit, do all kind of things. So that's, you know, that stuff. I'm not going to stay too long. Here we have something related to characters. So if I need to create text on the screen, this is controlling how big it is, right? And the most important window here is layers, right? So you have to understand that in Photoshop, you're not working like in old-fashioned editor where everything happens on the same page. Everything here can be hidden. It exists on a separate level, right? So for example, if I click on this, let's see, what is it hiding? It's hiding a specific filter on this side, right? So let's look at something like that. Let's look at something which will be more dramatic, right? So when we hide that, I'm hiding the background, right? So basically everything here is a layered composition, meaning that you're not dealing with something which on the same page. If you think about it like transparencies, right? You have like different pieces of transparencies. You can enable and disable them at will, right? So at some point, let me see, photo texture. So let's see if we disable this. So I have so many things that sometimes when I disable something, it's not visible. So this one is slightly changing this picture, right? So let's go take a look. So let's disable this. Okay, so now we're hidden this guy, and it was kind of black and white, and above it I have like a slightly colored copy. So you see I have something like that. So I'm playing with different layers, right? And you can arrange it, you can make folders, subfolders, you can make it, maybe it's easier, maybe it's going to be easier, we're going to start a brand new composition. So let me close this. I don't want to save anything. Let me illustrate this point one more time. I have less layers on this one. At some point I was making a poster for myself. I was doing, there was like exhibition about like different companies which are doing teaching about video games and different interesting things. So I was doing this. So on this layer, if I disconnect this, you see it's hiding pieces of the interface, right? So now you see how it was built, right? So I'm hiding them one by one. So I'm creating a poster which kind of looks like a, you see? So now the only thing we have is the background and the text. If we hide the background, it kind of looks like this. And this textured kind of like checkerboard means it's transparent. And now the only thing I have is text, right? So, and as I'm revealing them one by one, we're affecting it, right? Right? So you get the idea, right? So we're dealing with composition which exists on different layers, right? So let's do this. Let's do something brand new so it's easier, and we'll start with that because I think it's going to be much simpler than to deal with existing composition with a lot of things on it. So let me do a new document, right? And you can select how big it is. So let's say we're going to do something which look like a film, and it's going to be HD 720. By the way, that's another thing which is important. When you're dealing with people who are interested in video, they are thinking in these categories, right? So this is high definition 720p. Why is it 720? Because the dimensions of it is 1280 by 720 pixels, right? So this format is called 720p. There is another higher format which is called HD 1080p, and this one is 1920 by 1080. So basically what we're talking about, they're different video formats. And let us select this one, 720p, create, right? So it's brand new one. Let's hide this one. We can have multiple composition open. No. So we have a blank piece of page, right? It's a blank piece of paper, right? And it's called background, right? So if we double click on it, we'll call it something else. Let's say it's called layer one, fine, right? So now let's try to open something else. Let's try to open, I think I downloaded this one, Blue Sky, right? Okay, let's open this. So it opens this as a new composition, right? So I can use this selection tool, right, to select everything or just a piece of it. Let's say we're going to select this piece, right? And then you can use shortcuts. You can either do edit copy, right? And you can go to this composition and you can say edit paste. Do we have paste? We do have paste, right? Paste. So you see what it did automatically? In this layers menu, it created a brand new layer, right? And if I hide the background, this is how it looks, right? So if I change this tool, I can drag it around and I can do whatever I want with it, right? So we have a white background and we have a blue sky on top of it, right? And if we change the order, right, it's the other way. So now, if you think about it, these are like layered pieces of transparency, but whichever is on the top, that's the one which you see first. So since we have this layer first, right, layer 0, it has a white piece of paper in it, you do not see the other one. So if we change the order, so the order matters. What is on top is what you see first, right? So what can we do here, right? So let's say if you want to make this thing smaller, you can hit Control T, right? You get these controls, and you can make things smaller, larger. You can drag it around, you can reposition it, right? So let's say we made it like this, right? When you double click, it accepts your change, right? If you want to open something else, let's open something else. Let's open something, maybe let's open my logo, right? Open. Again, it selected the entire thing. If I want to see how big this is, I can go to image and I can go into the image size, right? So sometimes you want to know how big is something, right? So this one is 531 pixels. That's the width, and the height is 900 pixels, right? And resolution is 72. Everything on the screen usually have 72 dots per inch. If you need to print it, the resolution can be much higher. It could be 200, 300. When they're doing prints, it can be even higher than 300 dots per inch. So these are kind of basics of the image. What can be done with the image, how big it is, and what we can do with it, right? So let's say we're going to select this guy too. And you can also select it this way. You can say Control A. You see the margin ends, the selection above it, around it, right? So it means it's been selected. Then we hit Control C. It's selected. We can go in here, we can close the blue sky, we go in here, and now we're going to manually make a layer. You see, like here on the bottom, create new layer. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to paste it in that layer, right? So now it's here, right? And it's too large, right? It's too large for what we need to do. Again, we know the shortcut, Control T, and now we have the ways to scale it down. So let's say we're going to put it in here. This is going to be like a logo. We're going to put it in a corner, right? And when I double click, it accepts it, right? So now we have 3 layers. We have the background. If we hide it, we see the transparency. We have the blue sky, right? And we have this image, right? So fine. So when you click on different layers, you're affecting that particular layer, right? So if I go on this guy, and then make a selection. Let's say I'm going to take a selection tool, and I'm going to make this selection, right? I'm going to select it from this layer. But on the other hand, if I want to select something from the other layer, right? If I go in here and select this guy, in other words, if I select it here, I'm going to select from this layer. If I select it here, I will select from that layer. So you have to be conscious on what layer you are. Agreed? So basically, I'm explaining to you the basic game. I'm not going to make you Photoshop experts. And there are plenty of tutorials on YouTube and everywhere how to make that stuff. What is important right now is to understand the principles, right? So we have this blue sky, we have the picture, and we have the background, right? So let's say if I want to go in here to the layer, and we can call, if you double click on it, we can call it blue sky. This is the blue sky layer. This one we'll call the logo. So this way it's much easier because at some point you're going to have so many layers, it's going to be difficult to figure it out. And let's say we're going to make a brand new layer, and we're going to put some text on it, right? Text. This is, you see right now, this is the color it's going to make, and we're going to make it very large. Let's say we're going to make it 72 pixels, and we're going to say something like learning Photoshop, right? And maybe you say, you know what, I don't like this particular color. What if we want to select the color from here, right? So we can select the color. You see this eyedropper kind of like? We can select the color from here, or we can now make it much darker. Or we can select the color from here, right? So let's say this color if you want it. Maybe something like this. Okay, fine. Learning Photoshop, right? And now when I switch to this tool, I can make it larger. And also the same Control-T makes for controlling this thing. So you can also scale this guy like this, right? If you want. If you hold Shift, it will scale it proportionally, right? Learning Photoshop. And let's say we're going to make one more layer, and we're going to make it kind of like a large letter or something like that. Let's say double click, we made the selection, one more layer, right? We're going to use the tool one more time, and let's say on this one we're going to change it to something like this, and we're just going to type one character, right? Photoshop. And let's say we're gonna change the font. We're changing fonts here. So let's say we're gonna make it what do you want? Something like this? Maybe something like this. It doesn't even matter. At this point we're just playing, right? So let's do Control-T on this one more time. Make sure that we're on the right layer. Learning Photoshop. Right? Control-T. One more time. Okay, now we're doing it. Right, so we're going to make it huge. We're going to make it huge. Just to use it as a decorative element, right? Something like that. Something like this, right? And now on the right side, you not only have layers, but you can also control the transparency. Let me double click on this to accept it. And you see, now I'm controlling and making it more transparent, right? So it can be barely visible like this. And maybe for right now it's okay. Maybe a little more, right? So we can still see something like that. If you want to change it, you can change it like this. Right, so something like that. So fine, right? So maybe a little bit less. I'll move it here so it kind of aligns, right? So not only we have transparency, it kind of looks cool, but it's a very simple learning composition. We are not doing anything advanced, right? We also have something called transfer modes, right? So we can set different layers on how they're going to interact with each other, right? So let's say if we set this guy to overlay, right? And let's put the transparency back to 100%. Right? So you see what it's doing? It's affecting the colors. It's overlaying. This is the overlay mode, right? Let's, instead of overlay, put it to screen, right? So you see what it's doing? It's changing the colors. So you can have, we can put it to multiply, right? You see? So basically there are different formulas. It looks at the color above, it looks at the color below, and it makes a certain calculation based on the color of the pixels above and below. So you got the basic idea, right? We're not going to become experts in Photoshop right now. We're just doing the basics, right? So to review, everything exists on its own layer, right? So this is the layer of the letter P. This is the layer of Learning Photoshop. I can hide it and I can enable it. I can hide this picture if I don't like it anymore. Like, for example, look at it and say, without that picture, it looks much better. You can go to this blue sky, hide the blue sky. That kind of looks cool too. Right? And this is the background, right? You say, but what if I don't want the white background? I want the black background. No problem. We're going to make a brand new layer. And we're going to say edit fill, and it's going to give you choices. We want to fill it with black, right? We're going to try it with black background, right? So, and you see everything is hidden. Where did everything go? Everything is disappearing because this layer is on top of everything. So if I drag it on the bottom and I hide the white, now everything is on a kind of like a purple background, right? So if I go back to letter P and from multiply, I change it to normal mode, right? Now you see what's going on. So now we're dealing with black background, and or we can like we can say here, let's say we're going to make a brand new background. We're testing different things. We're going to do edit fill and fill it instead of with 50% gray, right? So that's cool, right? So we have this, we have that. We're going to hide that background. We have our text, and let's see if we can go to letter P and we change it back to, from normal, we're going to change it to multiply, right? So it kind of looks something interesting and cool, right? Another thing you can do, if you double click on the text, on the layer, right? You have all kind of like options as far as layer style, right? So you can make shadows, you can make, let me see, glows. You see, so you see the text is starting to glow. You can make drop shadows. The only thing is not to go overboard, because at some point it's going to become ugly if you overdo it, right? So what do we have? Okay, so we're kind of dealing now with this kind of interesting emboss. But again, the problem is it have to be very tasteful, because if you make something ugly and it kind of like says, hey, I know how to use Photoshop, people will say, okay, the person knows how to use Photoshop, but it looks ugly. So what's the point of that? It's not clear what is the point of that if you know how to use it, but it looks ugly, right? So, and let's say if we go back to this text, let me hide the effects. If you go to this text, let's say I want to make it more transparent, right? So you see I'm blending it, right? So if I blend it more, it disappears. So I'm kind of giving you an overview of what can be done in Photoshop so that you get an idea, right? I think I liked it more with a white background, right? Something like this. I think this was cooler, right? So let it be. Let me go back to this guy. Let me make it more transparent, right? Learning Photoshop, something like that. Let it be. By the way, these lines which you see here, these are the layer guides. They're not going to be saved. Once you save it, they're not going to be there. This is just to show you where is the safe area, because we told the composition that we want it to be for video. So this is the safe area, right? So this is the basic of Photoshop. Another thing, let me go to this, and I go to image adjust. Let's say I'm gonna adjust hue and saturation, right? So let me bring this dialog here. So now I can switch. Let's say I want it to be black and white, right? So now we're decreasing the color, right? We're decreasing the color of this blue sky, right? So it became kind of like a black and white photograph. Or I can increase it and it's oversaturated, right? So basically what I'm showing you is that one of the things which you can do in Photoshop, you can play with colors, right? You can make it lighter or darker, right? So now we made it kind of like a night sky, right? You can change the color, right? So let me make it more bright, like this, so it's going to be more obvious, right? So normal color was something like this. We can shift it towards red, or we can shift it towards green, to any color, right? So let's say this one, maybe we shift it towards purple, right? Something like this. So you got the idea, right? So this is what Photoshop can do. And once you're done, you say File, Save, and you give it a name. Let's say Learning 1. We saved it, but this is a Photoshop file. You're not going to send Photoshop file to people who don't know how to deal with it. So then you also need to export. And one of the ways is to do, let's say, a quick export, quick PNG file. So we're going to call it, it's called Learning 1. You're going to say, let's save it, right? Then we go to File Explorer. Let's go find it. It's in a folder called Graphics. In a folder called Graphics, what did we call it? Learning 1. So this is the PNG file. It's not heavy. Let me see how big it is. Let's change the view mode to details, right? So learning one is what? 339 kilobytes. So we can probably even make it smaller and compress it better. Maybe make it a JPEG. Let me bring it up. Where is it? Right. So this is just the viewer. This is the quick composition we did to learn how it looks, right? So this is the introduction to Photoshop. I also going to make introduction to Premiere and introduction to After Effects as a compositor, and probably introduction to some kind of node-based compositor, maybe the one built Fusion, the one which was built into DaVinci Resolve. And what else? And probably we're going to look at Maya. Maybe I'm going to combine a few of them. So that's it. So this is introduction. So if you ever deal with a creative person and they're saying, well, when we say in composition something is not working, I have layers, I don't know what to do, some layers are hidden, like I open my composition, everything looks like this, nothing is there, what's going on, right? So if you come to an artist and you're a system administrator, but they call you for help, now that you understand what we're talking about, you say, wait a second, you see this little eye? It means that these two layers are visible, right? But this guy is not visible, and when I click on it, lo and behold, it starts to appear, right? So you know how to hide and how to unhide, and you understand the basic idea of what people are working. What is it they're doing in Photoshop? You understand that they're working on layered compositions. You have layers, you have menus, you have different tools, you can change colors, you can add text, and you basically arranging and you kind of putting it all together, trying to see what looks beautiful, right? So that was the basic introduction to Photoshop. And if you're interested, let me know. I can make a class. I was teaching a class at some point in Los Angeles. Let me show my picture back. So take a look. You can go to adobe.com and download a 30-day trial. If you're a student, they're offering subscriptions, which are like, I don't know, $20, $30. You can have access, subscription to the full. You can have full access to all of the Adobe programs. Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, Premiere, After Effects, sound editing, everything which they make, you will have access to. So I think it's a good investment of your time to learn Photoshop. There are open source applications which kind of look like Photoshop. One of them is GIMP, right? We're going to look at GIMP. But basically, keep in mind this, that for every industry, there's a professional tool. If you want to work professionally, then you have to learn first the standard tool, and Photoshop is the standard tool for editing pictures, right? So after that, if you know the standard, the industry standard, then you can learn any kind of other tool which is helpful to you. So nobody is stopping you. But if you come in and you say that you know something exotic and you don't know Photoshop, people will not know what to do with you. But Photoshop, everybody who is making advertisement, everybody who is making pictures, videos, I can assure you 100% that somewhere they have Photoshop, and that's what they use for editing pictures. Okay, so that's the lesson, introduction to Photoshop. Thank you very much, guys, and bye-bye.